How's everyone doing?
Unbelievable.
Excellent. So this is the first time we've actually done lightning talks. We're going to see how it goes. There's a lot of interesting stuff lined up. So let's go through the easy stuff first. Next month, Adam is going to be talking about probably coordinator layout, content transitions, something.
Yeah.
Something. I like that. The month after that, Eric is going to be talking about something.
I told you what it was while we were drinking one night, and I forget what it was.
Is that not it? Is it changed?
It's not accessibility. That's what I'm doing tonight. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
So October is going to be on a different schedule. There's a handful of us that are going to be out at the Big Android Barbecue, so we're doing it a week later. November, we've got Michael and Benjamin lined up to talk about Android testing, and that's changed a lot over the last few years, so it'll be interesting to kind of see what's going on there. And at some point before the end of the year, we're going to try to do another coding challenge. If you haven't been to one of those before, come out. It doesn't matter how. If you've never done Android before, you're going to get something done. If you've done a lot of Android before, your fingers are going to hurt at the end. So come out and have fun. If you're interested in presenting in December or beyond, let me know. If you know anyone who wants to sponsor these things, let me know that too. Does anyone know anyone who's hiring right now? Steve, you said you got a bunch of people you know that are looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Lexmark just laid off a bunch of people, so there's an influx of unemployed coders in Lexington.
Okay. We're hiring a mid-level Android and iOS people right now, so if you're interested in either one of those, let me know. Anyone else hiring, looking? Oh, okay. All of the 8 different ways to stay connected with us between Meetup and Google and Twitter, and you guys know all this. Fox and Hound afterwards to keep the discussion going. And again, if at the end of the meetup, you can go and complete the participant survey. There's a link at the bottom of the meetup site. Google really enjoys seeing what areas or where people are active and how active they are. And it enters you to win free swag. So lightning talks. So we've got 4 out of the 5 of these people here tonight. So first up, we've got Jason, who's going to be talking about how to get a project started with version control in Android Studio. I don't think that Shane is here right now, so we're going to skip that one unless he comes in. Eric is going to talk about how to do ADA accessible apps. I'll talk about how to do Android support annotations. And then Stephen is going to talk about how to do effective testing on your Android apps. And with that, let's go. So there you go.
All right.
So Jason.
All right. You guys will have to bear with me. I am not a Mac user at all, so we're gonna have to try to figure this out as we go. Before we get started, a little bit about myself. I graduated from the University of Dayton in computer science back in 2009. I'm currently employed at London Computer Systems in Loveland. First 3 years there, I did VB6 development, and for the past 3.5 years, I've been doing .NET and C#. One of my biggest projects that I'm personally responsible for is doing our electronic payment processing module, which handles tens of millions of dollars worth of transactions each month. I've joined the Cincinnati Android Developer Group back in April, so I'm actually very new when it comes to Android. It kind of started coming here just to get myself in gear to try to start learning Android development. When I'm not writing code or spending time with my wife and son, you can find me on StarCraft, Hearthstone, Battlefield, CSGO, or recently Rocket League. If you haven't played that, you should. So before we get started, why I wanted to talk about source control, and the number one reason is in the past 6.5 years of working, I have found that none of our interns that we hire actually know what source control is. No college teaches it except for Brandon, who has told me multiple times that if you take his courses at UC, you will learn about source control. So for those of you that have taken his course, you can ignore everything I'm saying.
Thanks for spelling that.
No problem. I looked it up.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But for those of you that know what source control is and how to use this within Android Studio, this may be a little bit underneath you, but it's still very valuable for those that don't know. What source control is. It actually allows you to maintain versionings of all of your changes throughout your application's life. It's extremely valuable even for simple applications. Even if you've got a 100-line console app, version control will actually help you maintain all the changes that happen throughout the life of the application. It's especially helpful for those late night huge refactors that you do or that you start after a couple nights or a couple beers, and you had that one too many beers, and you wake up the next morning and your refactor is complete junk and you can't go back because you don't have source control. I've done that one time and it was terrible. So now anytime when I start a new application, regardless how small it is, I always put it in source control first. And then another huge thing about source control when you have multiple developers working on an individual application, it actually allows you to merge all the changes of those individual developers into when you're pulling those change or commits into a single file. Generally, you shouldn't be trying to work on the same file at the same time, but if you guys are experienced developers, you know that that's not always possible. So let's go ahead and see how we set this stuff up. I'm going to show or demo how to set this up with GitHub. It's obviously the most popular way of using, or it's the most popular site that's used for source control. I personally use Bitbucket because it offers free private repositories, but you can use whichever one you prefer. So I've already gone ahead and created my account, and I'm going to go and create a new repository. So I'm going to click here and just type in sample project, and we're going to leave everything else the same, leave it public, and I'm going to create repository. We're going to leave this screen open because this URL right here is actually going to be extremely useful to connect Android Studio to this actual remote repository. So from there, we're going to go into Android Studio, and we're going to start a new project. And we're just going to name this sample project as well. And we're going to do JSON. We're going to leave everything else the same. And again, we're just not going to worry about setting up an SDK, or we're just going to do a blank activity and leave the main activity the same. And Android's going to go ahead and create your whole new project. And once that comes up, we'll go ahead and get all that stuff committed to turn version control on for this particular project.
I think it loaded. You need to double click on the bar at the top.
Say what?
Sort of shrunk it to.
Oh, that's right. You told me about that last week. Okay. So from here, you can see that we've got this basic project set up. We're going to go up to VCS, and we're going to enable version control integration. This allows you to determine which version control system you want to actually use. We're going to use Git, obviously the most popular, I think. So that's going to turn version control on for this given project. Then you can see down in the lower left-hand corner, which I don't think anybody can actually see, we can click on version control, and it's going to actually show all the unversioned files. So I'm going to, is there an end key on Macs? Nope. Okay.
Command right
Command right. Can I do shift command right?
or down.
Yeah, you can do shift.
Okay.
Count down.
Sorry. And we're going to right click and we need to commit changes first. All right. Come on. Command shift left. Does that work? No. That's not working.
Command A.
Command A. Hey, that one works. All right. Did I miss a step already?
You gotta add.
Add to V. No?
No, you're good. Now they're all green.
Now Command A.
Okay.
Commit or just commit.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's why I like mice. Command A, double click down to Git. Commit files. Cool. Okay. So from here, now you can see that it's actually going to show you all the changes that you're about to commit to your local repository. What we're actually going to do to kind of speed things up is we're actually going to do a commit and a push. So that's going to actually commit the changes to your local repository, and it's also going to push the changes of your repository up to your remote repository on GitHub. So when we say commit and push, it will actually go ahead and tell us that there's problems, which I don't care.
Where do you see your branch?
I haven't branched. This is in the root directory. So maybe not the best practice, but we're just.
This Android Studio is a Google framework. Is it Google framework?
Yes.
So you guys now use the.
It's going to you have a dark message.
I mean, so the Android Studio is much better. Okay.
Okay, so now that we've committed, it's actually going to say, where do you want to push these to? So it's going to now ask for the URL that we've created on our GitHub, which I'm going to do that and go back. Command V. Nice.
If you think you were going to use control, then just use command.
But see, there is a control button. That's what's throwing me off. Is this your master password?
Welcome to my world.
This is for the Git repository.
I'm so used to using these.
Matt,
Now you can commit to
is that for mine or is that for
Well, see, I'm probably- that's what I'm-
There we go.
Oh, yeah, so, I-
Okay, cool. So the push was successful. So now if we go back to GitHub and is F5 refreshed? Nope. See, they just have to make things complicated. Now, if we hit refresh, you can actually see that all of those files are now pushed up to your remote repository on GitHub. If we want, I missed that. If you want, you can actually browse down. We're going to actually make a change on GitHub itself. We're going to modify one of these files. So where currently it says hello world, and I'm just going to change this to say goodbye world. And
That's horrible.
well, it knows I'm going to delete this repository. So
The Mac's not that bad.
It's supposed to be goodbye cool.
yeah, that's true. Change string. How do I scroll on this thing? Oh, there we go.
Up or down. or
Yeah.
whatever.
All right, so now I'm going to commit those changes. And now that on our remote repository, those changes have actually been committed. So what we can do to our local repositories, we're going to go down and we're going to go to Git, and we are going to say pull. And so this is actually going to pull those changes from the remote repository onto our local repository. And we're going to say pull, and then it'll actually show you which files have actually changed since your last pull. And if you right click on it, you can say show diff, and it will actually show you the differences between what was previously on your system and what is now on your system.
So how about you change locally? So you have
I'm sorry?
locally, then you have to push, right?
Yes, so if we go back, and then if we go back to, so now it says goodbye cruel world, or, oh my gosh, I hate this. So command shift does not do single character or single words.
Do alt arrow.
No, I'm staying world. So now if we hit save, we can actually go to the local changes directory, what you were saying, or the local changes tab, and you can right click on this and say show diff, and this will actually just show you what's different from the current file than what's in your local repository. Then you can actually do a commit to your local and then a push, and it will push that changes back up to your remote repository. And from then on out, now any changes that you make, you can actually look, well, let's go ahead and we'll commit this. We will commit and push. Wait. Let's do a push with the change a different name now. How do I change the push comment?
I think you hit cancel, so you have to wait, commit.
But I've already committed that, so you can't change the.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, but that's.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Another turn. All right, look at that.
All right, so we're just gonna push that. And it was successful. And if we go back over, you can see that we've now had 3 commits. And so you can see those each changes that you've done both on the remote side and then on the local side. And you can view the actual diffs of all the file changes that have taken place. You can revert back to a previous version if you've messed up something. It's just something that's extremely valuable. So I know that was a very basic talk, but it's something that as a new Android developer, I was having problems getting Android Studio set up with versioning control because it changed so much before the 1.0 and stuff. So, any questions?
So the Android Studio right now is very stable.
Yes.
Very good.
Ever since 1.0 that was back in, was it March or something?
I don't know if I'd call 1.0 stable.
Yeah.
It was
Ever
better.
since 1.2, I've not had any real.
Ever since 1.0 is when they fixed the Gradle stuff though, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's when the Gradle
That's-
merge.
Yeah.
Gradle term.
And that was the biggest problem is being a new developer or new Android developer. Every time I started a project, you'd have to rebuild Gradle, and that was always a nightmare.
At the end of this year, Google is deprecating or sunsetting all the Eclipse support that they're doing for the Android deployment and moving everything all focus into Android Studio.
It's so sad.
So
Yes.
I guess to sort of contribute to the presentation a bit.
Yeah.
I recently had to do a presentation on Git to the Westchester Automation Technology Club, and so my audience was a lot of people who didn't use Git for version control, and one of the ways now this is more just personal opinion, but I find that it's a lot easier to teach people how to use Git if you start with Git first and ignore the existence of GitHub first.
Okay.
Well, basically what I found works really well is that you focus on using Git on your local machine, and just do branching, commits, things like that. Explain how all that works first, and do maybe like 10 or 15 commits first. And then once you get that done, then using a remote repository like GitHub
Makes it pretty
I
easy.
tend to find that I did try the same thing before, where I would try to teach you how to use Git using GitHub, but I find that trying to do everything back and forth on a remote repository makes all the little stuff 10 times harder for some reason.
And that makes sense. I don't use GitHub at LCS. We use Perforce, which is more of a centralized type of version control, which we're trying to get away from. But I mean, that's one of the things. Like I found, like I said, I graduated from UD May 3rd of 2009, and I know that exactly because I found out about version control on May 4th, 2009, when I started working at LCS. So I mean. Yeah, and so the only source control that I actually have a personal experience with prior to trying to work stuff with Android Studio is Perforce. Because that's just what I used at home because Perforce is free for I think up to 5 developer licenses or something like that. So I actually had a Perforce server on my servers at home. So, but ever since Android Studio, I've been trying to branch out into other types. So, but that's a good point.
if you've never used Git before, GitHub actually has a pretty good tutorial on how to start with it, what Jeremy was saying. I'll put a link to that in the meeting notes.
Anybody else? Yes.
So you're doing .NET, you said right now? Is
Yeah.
that going to get this for local TFS?
To get,
Android Studio?
I do not know.
I would say no, yeah.
I didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, and that's,
Team Foundation server is a little bit different than anything else out there, so.
and again, we don't use that either. There's a big push to try to get our company to switch over to TFS, but it's getting kicked back because we've been using Perforce for 20 years.
There's a TFS plugin for a JetBrains TFS plugin though. So you may be able to.
Oh, well, Because there's a plugin in Android Studio you can get working. There's nothing keeping you from using TFS and just sending the files. Right. I guess it's just backed by.
May not be integrated with Android Studio very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just another note on like trying to teach people how to use Git.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found was like I don't usually bring in pull or commit and push until the very end. Like usually once you start using a remote repository, I do fetch and then purge first. Mostly because I find that if you tell someone to use pull first, what ends up happening is that obscures the way that remote. It's a bit weird. It obscures the way that remote branches work, which for some reason has been the source of quite a few headaches later.
Yeah, and that just may be my lack of real expertise using Git in general. So, okay.
I think the most important thing to remember is you have a local copy of the repository.
Right.
That is completely separate from the
Remote. Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you.
Eric?
So tonight I'll be talking about migrating to Visual Source Safe 6. I'll be talking about accessibility and why you should just be doing it anyways. Well, let me get my laptop all set up. Yee. It's real yellow looking. Sorry, I think it's my HDMI adapter. That's what I get for having a really old Mac. All right. If I can present, that'd be awesome. There it goes. And I'm full screen. All right. So, brief introduction to accessibility, patterns, methods. My name is Eric Roth. I'm an Android developer. I've been doing this for the past 4 years, I guess. So not too, well, 5. I was playing around for, I guess, a year, but then I actually got a job doing Android. I've been doing Android for the past 4 years. I recently implemented accessibility in an app, and it was actually pretty easy to do. And so if you're not already doing accessibility, there's really no reason not to. So I'll get into how simple it is, different ways to do it, why you should do it, and a few little issues I ran into while doing it. Why make it accessible? Yeah, I drew that today. I was pretty happy. You should make your app accessible because 45 million Americans actually are using mobile devices, and there's 20 million Americans, not necessarily that have a mobile device, but that have some sort of visual, disability. Also, there's laws. And so if you offer something like coupons on your app for a store and someone that's visually impaired is not able to access those coupons, you're liable for a lawsuit, as Target found out a few years ago. and ended up having to settle out of court for a large amount of money. I think it was 6 million, I don't know. But Android gives you all of these tools to make accessible programs, so why aren't you doing it anyways? So to enable accessibility, this was one of the biggest issues people that I work with ran into. To enable accessibility, you get to accessibility and turn on the TalkBack service. And it's almost the same steps in pre-Lollipop. But that's probably the easy part, turning it on. The hard part you run into is learning how to actually navigate in accessibility mode. So there's two ways. You can swipe down and swipe up to move a cursor around the screen, and it will select the different boxes. So if I go and I swipe down, it'll select that. If I swipe down again, it'll select that. If I swipe down again, it'll select that. And then swipe down again, it'll select that, and that, and that, and you get the idea. So another thing Android has is a touch to select. So if you're just, if you just have visibility issues, if you're not able to see that well, but you can sort of see around the area that you want and then tap on it, they have something called Explore by Touch. So you do one tap to select. If I wanted to select captions, I just tap, and it would put a box around it. Now that doesn't exactly click on it. So after you select it, you double tap, and then it actually performs the action on that view you have selected. Another quick intro to gestures, you have swipe. So instead of using a single finger swipe to go up and down, you can use 2-finger swipe to go up and down. And there's also additional gestures on the TalkBack help page. So they have L gestures where you can draw an L on there and it'll go back or go to home. The reason why I'm telling you all of this is it's sometimes hard to get out of accessibility once you get into it. And I've seen that drive a few people absolutely insane. And I have to go and carry their phones back to non-accessibility mode. It's really hard to use unless you know what you're doing. So that's why I'm getting those few things out of the way. Now, the general flow, as I was showing before, it starts in the upper left hand, goes down to the bottom right hand. Floating action button, a bit of an issue with this. My personal preference of dealing with floating action buttons is you go nav hamburger, title, menu item, floating action button. That's generally the flow that I try to maintain. But then after that, you should go through each of these items one by one. If you have a star there, you should need to go through that too. But you go through them one by one all the way to the bottom right-hand corner. That is the accepted flow of moving through each item. And you can do that through, I forget the name of the, next focus. You can specify next focus if you really need to mess that up. But generally, if you're putting your layouts right, Android's really smart about moving to whatever's next in a sequence from top left to bottom right. Now, the method in which we do this, that might be a little hard for some people back there to see, but I'm sure most of you all have seen this before, where it says missing content description as a lint on an image view. And really all that's saying is you have an image. So you need to be able to describe this image to someone that's not able to see the image. And in this case, adding this content description to Android content description, passing a string into it, if you are using the accessibility functions, as you're swiping through all of the items on the screen, it will stop on that and it will say, this is a picture of Pierce Brosnan. So they'll actually know what the picture is instead of saying image view. Thanks for telling me that I'm looking at an image when I'm blind. So next we have important for accessibility. This will, you can use this for a few different things. You can hide, in this case, hide descendants, means that everything underneath this linear layout is going to be ignored by the accessibility. If you say yes to important for accessibility, it will ensure that it will stop on that and get focus. No just skips the single element. And that way you don't have it reading off. If you just have a caption or something underneath of an image view, but you still have content description set on the image view, you can say the caption is not important for accessibility and it'll read right over it. Now, edit texts are one of the caveats to accessibility. Android hint is actually used as the content description. So if you set a content description on an edit text, it will just be ignored. That's just something that it does. I have nothing else to say about that. Yes.
You might want to mention one of the gotchas is that Android tries to pronounce words and it often does it wrong.
Yes. So actually, yeah, thank you, Greg. That's a great point to bring up. So we had first name and then an asterisk behind it. And well, when you're going through, it would say first name asterisk. You'd be like, what's the asterisk for? So in this case, we said first name, period, which puts a pause in there. And then we put required. And that way, our users are able to hear that the first name field is required instead of having to scroll through the entire page down to the bottom where the asterisk says, just to realize, oh, wait, that first name asterisk meant required. I'm sure they could probably figure that out, but this is a whole lot simpler.
We had an issue where we had a capital word, and for some reason it was reading it as Roman numeral and putting the, because it ended in.
Yes.
What
So that was probably first, or it would read it as first, but it was there's like a LIST or something,
Yeah, that's it.
and then it would say L first.
No, it said 50 first.
50 first?
Yeah, because L.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
LI is Roman numeral.
Hey, you'll find these little things, so it's extremely important to at least test your app against accessibility, because sometimes you'll run into these weird little issues, and most of the issues we ran into weren't exactly Android issues. It was, I'll get into that later. So, yes. So thank you for bringing that up too. You need to be aware of what the Google text-to-speech will read off your text as when you pass it into content description. So there's also ways to set these options in code. There's a view compat. I don't know if any of you all have ever used view compat. You're able to go and use new view features that are available through App Compat v4. I guess it is v4. App Support v4, my bad. But you can use view compat to give you new features on old views. So if you're running Android 2.3, you're able to give a sort of accessibility to 2.3 devices. And in this case, I'm able to set the important for accessibility, pass in the view compat in the view, which is message. And I can just go and pass that into any view. So even though it's not supported on Android 3 devices, I'm able to run this on an Android 2.3 device and still make my app accessible. There's also a set content description, so you don't have to do that in the XML if you don't want to, or if it doesn't make any sense to. Accessibility isn't limited to screen reading. So if I'm hard of hearing and I just had a notification go off on my phone, actually, I should have put that on airplane mode. But if I have a audible notification, it should be visible as well. because you're not only catering to people that have vision deficiencies, you're catering to people that have any sort of disability on your app. And that also goes with color blindness. So be sure not to use very similar red and green kind of colors for colorblind users, because they'll not be able to make the difference at all. If you have a red button on a green button, then someone that color blindness won't be able to differentiate between the two, and things get really confusing.
Does it actually say something?
It says 2.
All right.
Yes.
So there's no way to divide it into turn on just auditory accessibility or anything like that. You have to turn on all the accessibility features.
Well, really, on these issues right here, so the accessibility really caters to visual accessibility. The audible notifications, those need to have some sort of visual representation too. So in the instance of me getting a message, my light now flashes on the front of my phone. And also I'll see the item go up into the status bar. Those are visual representations. And if I just go and I say, if I made a program that received a message and just yelled out, hey, you have a message, but I didn't turn on any of these other indicators, or I didn't flash a status bar, then the only way I'm able to actually know I have a message is by hearing that message come through. And that's sort of what I was getting at with that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, say you're hard of hearing, so you see the message notification, but let's say you're scrolling through a menu item, you're hard of hearing, but you still have to scroll.
So another option with that is they had a feature like this in pre-Lollipop, but I think Lollipop really made it prominent, is you can turn on system level captions. So if any app is going and speaking audio, they can also go and set a caption for that audio. I've never dealt with that, but that's a way that you can make the audible notifications or audible context more visible to the user. Let's see, there we go. Here's just some other things. I already talked about the edit text using the hit text. The buttons. So if you have a form and you have a whole bunch of form validation where you have that cool little pop-up that comes up below the text field, chances are the accessibility is either going to miss that, or the person, if it pops up above it, the person might even miss it. So if a visually impaired user is going through a list of options, entering in information, they might have missed one. They get to the bottom of the list where a submit button is, and it says submit disabled. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what they missed. They don't know what they need to change. They have to go back up one by one, all the way through all of the forms on the field, on the form page, all the fields on the form page, and figure out which one hasn't been set correctly. And that's very troubling. So one thing you probably should do is, as you do form validation, you need to build an accessibility sort of detail string where you can then put into the content description for the button once they reach the end of the accessibility.
Do you know if the new text input layout as part of the design support library handles that condition well?
So I've not played around with it. I've played around with the cool animations and all that fun stuff, but I haven't played with the accessibility portions of the design library. I'm guessing it does not handle this well. That would be the safest assumption. So at least in the app that I work on, we build a large string. We say first name is required, button disabled. And it gives them the reason why the button's disabled at the end. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you need to go through your app and just try to use it without using sight. And then you'll sort of get a feel as to how your app flows. And as long as you keep the main flow going through your app and you make all of the different options available to the users, then blind people will not have any issue with your app. Colorblind people won't have an issue with your app. Hard of hearing people won't have an issue with your app. Another issue we've run into is with list views. If you use list views with headers and footers, it will announce that there's a certain number of items in a list view, except it counts headers and footers as items. So you could only have one item in a list view. My laptop turned off. You could only have one item in a list view, and it will say list view, 3 items, just because it has a header and a footer on top of it. And that's a really annoying bug, and I have not figured out a way around that apart from making my own headers and footers in a extended list view. So I have no idea around that. You'll just have to figure it out yourself. I'm sorry. Some devices, as I said, rhymes with Samsung, have their own screen reader built in. And when you're dealing with things like Greg brought up, where you might have an OH and it will say, well, it says OH, but then on some devices it'll say Ohio. Or if you go to button, on Android devices, it'll say like submit button. And then other ones, it won't say anything. So then you add a button to the end of it to make it compliant. But then the other devices will say submit button. And it's those kind of things.
Oh, it's the submit button.
Yes. Well, you get that kind of stuff all over the place on some devices, and there's no way around it.
Okay, so back to this last one. I mean, in the past, this is very terrible because Android has so many manufacturers, so many versions, right? So it's not like iOS, we can, upgrade, So how things going now? I mean, is it still a problem right now, or is it getting better?
So a whole lot of the device manufacturers have gone more towards a Google-centric sort of way, where they're relying on Google to provide the functionality in the operating system. There's really only a few device manufacturers that really just wreck everything and screw it all up. So I talked about one up here. But on an LG, on an HTC, on I've used the Motorola, and they all seem to play very nicely with accessibility. There's no real gotchas.
So I mean, not just accessibility in general.
In general,
Generally.
I don't know. I run pretty much stock Android on all my devices, so I try not to worry about that kind of stuff anymore.
So the important thing about it is definitely listen to the way it pronounces your labels.
Yeah.
Don't capitalize stuff that doesn't need capitalizing. So like if you're
Calling too lower on things
Yeah.
definitely helps, because sometimes it'll interpret things as if you have an all caps R, the word, then it'll say
so the easiest
A-R-E instead of saying R.
So the easiest thing is if your UI calls for having all capital letters, capitalize it in the font and don't capitalize it in the text.
Exactly.
How do you deal with like maybe a hominin? Words that are spelled the same but pronounced differently?
I've not run into that issue just because Google Voice or Google Talkback is pretty good at picking out those words out of the context of it, I guess. But if it happens, I'm sure that the people using the app are pretty well versed in understanding which one it means.
The other thing is sometimes it won't always pick up acronyms. It'll try to pronounce the acronym, and you can like force it to pronounce the acronym by putting periods in between or spaces.
Yeah, the periods are a great way to add just a pause in between letters or words or different sets of data. If you put a period in between Well, if you just do period, period, period with spaces in between, it does a little bit of longer pause sometimes on some devices. So
It doesn't say ellipse.
not if you're not using the ellipse character. So, yeah. So that's about it with accessibility. It's a quick primer, I know, but it's very important to have in your app. Yes.
It's just a matter of convenience. Obviously, if your whole app is very much just material plane strength is not an issue. But if for some reason you have like some sort of color contrast issue that you're not sure about, like it's not simply like text on a white background, then there are a bunch of really convenient contrast checkers out there for web accessibility. And so if you're in doubt, you can usually pass the colors through one of those. And if it's okay there, you're generally okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. Is the tools that are available for checking your websites against WCAG and all that fun stuff is those can still apply to Android. Those can still apply to iOS accessibility. Oh.
So when you say to keep your flow in a general sense, when you were talking about the hover button or whatever, how is that generally done? Because it seems like this is basically ran off a tab order from a desktop perspective.
Yeah.
But you don't have. But for Android, it uses how the XML is structured.
Generally, it's how the XML is structured.
Okay.
Things get a little bit more difficult when you're using stuff like a frame layout.
Yeah.
And a relative layout. In that case, it goes off as Z ordering.
Okay.
So the order in which you have the items in the layout, it will get through those one by one.
Okay.
Which isn't always exactly
What you want.
tab specific. So that's a special case with the floating action button. If you have a frame layout where it's a line bottom right or something,
right,
then it's going to read off your main stuff first and then go to the floating action button. So you might need to move that back either on top of it and then change the Z ordering, or go and just change the next focus variable of your parent layout, and then the previous focus on the floating action button.
Okay.
That way it sort of directs the flow of it.
You got code with that custom view. That needs some type of input. How do you handle that?
Well, what do you mean needs some kind of input? Like
Let's say you have one big view. Yeah, sure. It has a bunch of cards on it.
So let's say I had a 500 app.
Sure. Go with that.
In that case, if the view is not a standard Android view where you have a whole bunch of subviews and all of that, then you're going to have to get really smart with the way.
What if you're not smart?
If you're not smart, then I don't know. Then you might just make a Euchre app. Yes, I have no idea how to handle this in GL. I'm guessing that you would have to maintain your own focus around the different views or views that you're drawing on the screen. That's the only way that I can think of doing it, or just announce what's going on, what they're tapping on.
In the party play, queen of party play, ace of party play.
Yeah.
In your hand, hearts are.
You could even tell them the wrong cards.
People bitch about that already.
All right.
And some of the newer APIs, I think there are some accessibility methods you can override how to use the customize that a little bit. I've not played with them, but I know that they're there. So.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Here's Brosnan or Daniel Craig.
Brosnan. Huh? I don't know. I was talking 007 earlier with Sean Connery. Instead of Connery or Connery, I forget. What's the name of the street on Fields Road?
Conrad? Is it Conrad?
Sounds right. So it
You
was a
have
stretch.
a Pierce process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just playing the name association game or something.
I could have been going to Alex Trebek.
Yeah, I was thinking. No, I really think Sean Connery thinking about Alex Trebek,
Actually, I can make this a little bit
Celebrity
bigger.
Jeopardy.
Therapist.
And I was wondering,
So who has ever written a bug?
Written the bug?
wait, like
Yep.
intentionally?
Hopefully not intentionally, but okay, who has ever had their app crash? Who has ever had their app crash and then you figure out what's going on and you feel like an idiot? Did you hear this in your head? So when you get a null pointer exception in your app and you figure out what's going on, it's like, that is stupid. Do you ever wish that the tooling could help you? So before I get started too far into this, who has heard of the Android support annotations? Okay, so 3 people. Okay, perfect. So first, this presentation is up on GitHub. Everything that I do goes up on GitHub. Just go to github.com/Patrick Hammond and find the most recent repository. I've got 2 branches in here. One has really crappy code, and then the other one has a slightly less crappy code. When you pull this down, I really recommend using Android Studio because it'll help you see the impact that support annotations can have in your development workflow. So first, what are they? The support annotations are things that you can use to add hints to your code to help identify and eliminate bugs. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to find issues sooner. Adding them in is super easy. Add this to your Gradle file, 1 line. If you're pulling in app-compat, I believe this pulls it in for you, so you don't have anything to do. They're already there. So with that said, we're going to jump straight into some code. Let me make this full screen. Oh, I'm in the wrong project.
That's still my project.
Thank God, 'cause I was getting to be terrified. Like, this doesn't look familiar at all. Okay. So this really buggy app that I have has 2 activities: a main activity with a bunch of behavior in it, and a base activity with a little more behavior that extends app-compat. You know, what you kind of expect to see in an application. There's lots of buggy code in here, so let's take a look at some of these. So to create this activity, there's a method up here called createIntent. You give it a context and a username. It's going to use the username later to put into a title. You put username on intent, return the intent, and then someone else later is going to call start activity. You get down here and your onCreate method. You pull the value off, and then later on we're going to do something and call setTitle on it. What happens if someone passes in a null value here? What happens to your app? Yep, down the drain. It would be really awesome if we could avoid that. What if we told it something really simple? Not null. So now if anyone tries to call that, let's do an example. Static void some method. So you notice how it immediately highlighted that guy? It's saying, hey, you're doing something stupid. this is a null value. This is going to crash your app. You're breaking the expectations for what the app wants you to do. Let's change that to now it's happy. Same thing here. We could do a app. Let's say we wanted to allow this guy to be null because we're going to handle him later. Hello. Let's do an app. That should have complained. So assume you see a yellow block over this saying, hey, could be causing your app to crash. Why you're not seeing that is the set title method isn't annotated with in the Android base class, isn't annotated with app not null. So, okay. Who has ever tried to pass an integer thinking that there was a color into some method that expected a color? And you give it a resource, it expects an int value, an RGBA method, and then you spend half a day trying to figure out why you have a bug. Yes, lots of hands. There's a solution to that now. So let's take a look at bug number 2. The set background color method on get Decker view expects not what I'm passing in. It's saying if you run this, you're not going to get what you want. If you take a look at the method that they have in the view class, they're basically saying we want not a color reference, or not a color resource, we want a color value. You see this @colorInt method that they put into the SDK? So they know that this is a resource and not what they want. So if we do a get resources, get color, life is good. Now we're passing in the right value. We've saved half a day of bug hunting.
So you add those will cause the compiler error, so you cannot run at all.
It depends. Some of them you can configure it. So some of them will show up as warnings, some of them will show up as non-fatal errors, some of them will show up as errors that'll prevent your app from running. It's all things you can tune in the tool. But either way, they bring these issues, the visibility of these issues forward, so that way you find them sooner. Let's take a look at another thing. Who has ever tried to make a network call in their app, and when you run it, the first thing it does is it blows up gracefully with a security exception saying, hey, you forgot to add a permission in. And then you go back and it's like, so you go through and you add the permission back in, and then life is good. So this one is, if you're building SDKs, is really useful. So let's say you're making a web request, creating a URL connection, you're doing all this stuff, and you don't have the app requires internet permission in your manifest. App crashes. So if you're exposing this to someone else, it'd be really awesome if you could do a app requires permission manifest dot permission dot internet. And now we have a warning up here. It says missing permissions required by checking with home permission internet. So, okay, awesome, that's cool. Go over here, click on the quick fix, hit add permission to internet, and it adds it to your manifest. Life is good.
Sorry, can I see that in the annotation again?
Uh-huh. And I've got all these up on GitHub too, so. So if you're exposing a SDK to someone and you require certain permissions, putting these around the interesting things will make someone else's life much easier. They'll try to start pulling stuff in and see red squigglies, and they can just fix it really quickly. Let's see. Bug number 4. The Java I/O APIs are really notorious for returning Boolean values in very awkward spots. And they're values that you need to listen to. There's deleting files will return a true or false versus throwing some type of exception. Creating files will do the same. It's just kind of inconsistent with the way a lot of other things work in the API. So let's say you've got some code that will go through and delete a temporary file. So you're returning the status code from delete, which says if this file is deleted, return true, otherwise return false. You know, something that you probably want to listen to. You might be trying to delete the wrong file. So let's go up here. We're seeing, we're going to try catch block. We're handling the I/O exception, but we're never handling the case of what happens if the file wasn't deleted. We put a check result on there. It knows that this code completely ignores the return value of this, which is not something that they should do. Code's good. I had one more in here, I thought. Go back to here. We talked about non-null. The opposite of non-null is nullable. It's if you've got code that's checking for null conditions that should never happen. This will help identify dead code for you. Talked about the resource values, requires permission. Oh yeah, we talked about check result. Let's do check call super. Who has ever overridden an Android lifecycle method and forgot to call super? Yep, all of us. Okay. So let's say we've got a base class, and we've got some method in here that does some really important stuff. It's got something that can override it, but people who override it should also always call this. It's the same way that you would do it with, on resume or on pause or on create, always call into the base class. If we go over here, we are overriding, do some setup. We're never calling into the base class. We broke the expectations that that base class had on how this is going to be used. So we're going to have some type of wrong behavior in our app. It'd be really awesome if we could do a now we've got a warning over here that says, hey, you've overridden this guy, but you're never calling into the base class. Let's go over here, let's do a super nut, do some setup. Error goes away. Bug prevented. The last one I have is, let's see, where is it? There we go. Who writes unit tests? Okay, a lot of us. Who has ever had to make a method unideally visible to support writing a test case around it? And who has ever written a method that's like, visible for testing? Yep. So comments are a really good way to create dead code in your app because they never get refactored. If you did this gives you a better clue as to why something might have a higher visibility than it really needs to. It's just a hint along the ways as you're scanning through code why something is the way it is. There's a crap load of these annotations. If we go to, see if they've got the full list in here. Yeah, there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, things for threading, nullness, resources, constraints. If you've ever passed in a wrong integer value, something expects, something from 0 to 255, and you pass in 512. Before you would never have a indication that you're passing in something wrong. This can help with that. Actually, I ran into this recently with one of the APIs that got deprecated. Yeah, go ahead.
There was a bit up at the top about threading that you sort of glossed over. Is there some way to prevent it from like calling a function from the main thread?
I don't have a whole lot of experience with this one,
Okay.
so that's why I skipped over it. It, in theory, ensures that certain methods are going to be called on certain threads. So if you're doing IO work, it'll be on a background thread or a worker thread, as they're calling it. If you're doing UI work, it should be on something else.
But you always want to do network and database calls in your UI thread. That's what I've been told.
If you really love Jank and A&Rs, yes, absolutely.
Actually, I think the new strict modes don't allow any of that.
I think with Android 4 or 5, if you do IO, if you do network stuff, it'll crash your app immediately if you're doing it on the main thread. So either way, they've got a ton of annotations in here that'll help make your code a little more safe. The ones I get the most value out of are the @null and @non-null values. If you ever expect that a certain value could be null, just mark it with @nullable. The rest of your code will appreciate it. Future you will appreciate it. Let's see.
It's kind of nice too, because when you, if it's been annotated with not null or nullable, when you pull up the method signature to like start pulling in, you can actually see that written out.
Yep.
And Andrew's to do that, so you're like, oh, I can pass it in.
Yep.
Or, no, we can't pass it in.
So you'll get all kinds of information from Android Studio automatically just by giving it a few extra hints. The last thing I'd say is don't annotate everything. If you've got a class that has 30 different fields and you've now added 30 different annotations with @nullable or @non-null, you're creating more noise than probably offers value. So just kind of be judicious and smart about where you're putting it. That's it. Any questions? Do you think this would help your code? Lots of head nods. Excellent. That's what I wanted to see. That's all I have. Yep, you're up.
We're over on time. Do you guys mind if I rush through my thing real quick? Cool.
Yep.
Cool. We get the beer after this.
Yes, sir. I don't have HDMI. Do you have the?
Do you have their cable?
Yeah. All right.
In your pocket. Says it down in my pocket. Did I leave it up there?
You lost your dongle.
Oh, no.
It's like,
Is it my pocket?
Yes, sir.
He's just happy to see it.
my favorite one. It says, it actually calls out. It says this needs to be fixed before version.
So yeah, we'll do this real quick. I'm Steve. This is the coolest like presentation style I could find on Microsoft, whatever this is. Strange inputs. This is going to be really high level. I'm generally a black box tester. Let's introduce myself. Who's this guy? I'm Steve. My company's Fresh Eyeballs. I do quality assurance consulting. You can find me at steve@fresheyeballs.pizza. My website's fresheyeballs.pizza. Really valuable top-level domain .pizza because it breaks every form I try to put it into. It's valid. I don't know why. So real quick, high level, like I said, what software? It's some inputs and it's some outputs. Whenever we're thinking about at a conceptual level what our software is going to be, we think about things like this. And this is a really simple app that I will use as an example a few times in this talk. But this is my Do You Like Pizza app. Do you like pizza? Checkbox. Yes, no. Submit. Those are our inputs, the Boolean and the submit. And the output will be something like storing that value on a database, presenting to the user like, oh, successfully saved. This is what you like pizza now, whatever. But what are these strange inputs I'm talking about? So what I'm actually talking about are platform-specific inputs. Today, really quickly, we'll be talking about some Android-specific inputs. But strange inputs, platform-specific inputs are things that you can't really stop the user from doing. Like on web browsers, you can't stop the user from reloading, going back and forward the desktop. They can paste. They can do weird things with their mouse with the right and left click that you might not expect them to do. I've worked at a couple printer companies. So I'm, what's that?
PC load letter?
Yeah. Out of toner. What happens when you're halfway through a document and all of a sudden you're out of toner? Those kinds of weird inputs that you're not necessarily thinking about at the concept level. We actually had a lot of commands that we could send to the printer to fake these kinds of things. So we would have like a PJL command, a printer job language command, that would force the printer to think it's out of toner, that kind of stuff. Or Scantron, what if they like used a pen? That's a weird input. What if they put the format upside down, or they put multiple or no answers for an expected single answer? So we're here to talk about, let's take our app from before, Do You Like Pizza app, and put it on Windows. So this is what it looks like. The reason I even bring this up as an example is because at a certain point in my career, I worked on some enterprise software. It was like document design kind of stuff. And first week there, I tried to drag a JPEG onto the window of the enterprise software I was working on, and it crashed. So this is the kind of stuff that you're not necessarily thinking about from a concept level, but when you're actually on these different platforms, these are things that the user is going to try to do. And especially when you're designing like this huge document, you spent all day and you haven't saved, and you just tried to drag a JPEG on your thing and it crashes and you lost a day's worth of work, that's a big problem. So let's talk about specifically Android. So my talk's mostly going to be fun videos of Android bugs. Number one, screen orientation. When I first met Patrick at Atomic Robot, he was like, you ever tried this thing where you just like do this to an app? Yeah, I have. Vertical to landscape and back again. The app that I've got a video of here, the Color Loving app. It's Color Lovers. You guys use that website? It's like a social media website for like colors. No. Anyway, it's awesome. My friend wrote an unofficial Color Lovers Android app. It was awesome. She handed it to me, and I said, "All right, let's do it. Let's do the thing." So here it is. Let's boot it up. Color Loving. And first thing I did, within 30 seconds, I just started doing this. Oh, man. All my videos end, by the way, with me dragging down and stopping the recording. Yeah, so just something to keep in mind, especially for things that are complicated to draw, I would say. And a lot of these are like contextual, like if we're dealing with an app that draws, we're going to want to see what the redraw acts like. The multi-click, the two-finger click. This is something that Alex, thank you very much. This is something that you might not necessarily expect on a Windows machine, for instance, but with Android, that's available to the user. So they might try doing things, especially if they're malicious and you made a game. So thank you so much, Alex. This isn't supposed to be shaming. This is supposed to be fun. The Euchre app. Let's just see what happens. I'm gonna have to stop this a couple times because I'm gonna have to say what's happening here. But with the Euchre app, first thing we're gonna do is load it up. Oh wait, I go through a silly thing here real quick. So you've got single player and multiplayer games, as you can see. Shit, just go back. Single player and multiplayer games. When you push single player, it's going to ask you if you want to resume your game or start a new game. If you go into multiplayer, it's going to go into the options for setting up a multiplayer game, creating a lobby, joining a lobby. So if you push both at the same time, single player and multiplayer come up simultaneously. Single player is in the background now. Multiplayer, let's go ahead and do all the things to create a private lobby. And when the app is ready, we go back. And in the background now, we have a multiplayer game ready, but it asks still if you want to continue the single player game. You push that, and now we have a lobby with a single player game behind it. I don't know what happens if you continue from here because I didn't want to mess with your production servers, but that's
Our servers don't work anymore.
But yeah, so two button clicks. This is especially, I've broken a lot of apps just by if they've got a thing that looks like a radio list where you're only supposed to be able to click one, and you click both at the same time, you'll be able to enable two things at once, for instance. The Android keyboard. Accessibility, thank you, Eric, for talking about this earlier. But there's a bunch of shit on the, can I say shit? Patrick, can I say shit? Okay. There's a bunch of shit on the Android keyboard that you wouldn't expect from a traditional keyboard. Emojis. What happens when you put an emoji in a user or whatever? Microphone. The next button and the done button on forms are particularly interesting to me. So I'm going to pull up this Parentine app. This is an app for putting a device in your kid's car, and then you can track where they're going. It's kind of weird. Whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up Parentine, and we're going to register right off the bat. I'm going to pause. So we've got a form. Check out the form. It's first name, last name, email address, mobile number, password, confirm password. And I'm just going to go and pretend we're a disabled person, accessibility issues. The next button down in the bottom right, that's my primary concern when we're dealing with this kind of input. So what do you think is going to happen? We're going to type the first name, and then what should happen when I push next? Should go to last name, right? So, oh, nope, it went to email address. Why did we skip last name? So we're going to fill in that. We're going to fill in mobile. And then what happens now when I push next? Should go to password. It doesn't. God damn it. Let's skip ahead. It goes straight to confirm password. For some reason, we skipped password. And I'm going to hit done because that's what the Android keyboard told me to do because I'm on a form and I need the accessibility shit. And it's going to complain. You didn't fill all your shit. I filled all the shit you gave to me. I don't know what happened. So yeah, all that minutia of the Android keyboard, losing data or connectivity, GPS, all those features that you need to request specific access for when you're installing an app. Check out your app. If any of those given things are not accessible, if the user is even able to turn that stuff off after they've installed your app. My example here is What 3 Words. The app What 3 Words is a location app. They took the entire globe and cut it up into 5 by 5 foot squares and assigned 3 words. So I could tell my friend to meet me at corn, apple, pineapple. And like that's like a thing that they've assigned to this 5 by 5 square. Their slogan is everyone and everywhere now has an address. And one of their selling points is around 75% of the world is not addressed. So people don't have a location. They can say, meet me at 123 Main Street or whatever. First of all, do those weird out of the way places even have reliable data connectivity? So let's try this. Let's try this out. So this is What 3 Words, and I'm going to search for location. I'm just going to put something in that's not going to give me a valid response. ZZZZZ. And it's going to say, oh, we didn't find a result for that. And then I'm going to turn off, I'm going to turn on airplane mode, which is going to turn off my 3G, but not my GPS, because if you guys didn't know, turning on airplane mode doesn't necessarily turn off your GPS. So this should keep working for me. And so, so I turn on airplane mode. Takes a second. I'm kind of disappointed because a lot of these examples that I had in my brain that I was going to pull up are fixed now, so I couldn't come up with really good videos. This used to crash, but it gets super janky still, so that's still kind of fun. It gets super unresponsive when entering and leaving data connectivity. And that's the kind of thing that's going to happen when you're using an app that is meant for places that are not addressed. Let's keep going. Platform changes. So this is a kind of input. You kind of expect that your platform is always going to be this way, and that if you hit an API, it's always going to respond in this way. Or code just gets stagnant. Things that used to work just stop working because things out from under you get changed. My example here is GIMP. I used to work with a lot of software that supported a lot of different image formats. So I would go to like Photoshop and GIMP, and I would just push out every kind of image that I could that our software claimed it could support. So I go to GIMP, and like they support like 100 different image formats. They support this thing called Kiss Cell. I'm like, what even is a Kiss Cell? Oh, it's this. It's a Japanese paper doll system from the 90s. There's no reason to support this, but they do. It's weird. So okay, let's see what happens when we try to save a Kiss Cell. Of course, it crashes. Like 1 in 10 of the things in GIMP that you try to save as crashes. I have a lot of bug reports on GIMP. Not as many on Photoshop, is weird. But we're here to talk about Android. So Patrick, thank you so much for letting me use this example. I asked for permission for most of these examples. Atomic Robot, awesome company, and I couldn't mess with, I couldn't crash too many of their apps. Atomic Robot, or Lantern, however, we load it up. Let's load up Lantern. It's a task management software. We create tasks, we create lists of tasks. So when I do the first thing it tells me to do, you should add an item to your empty list, add it. I get it. No, so Patrick told me the reason that it crashes is because I am further ahead in the Android operating system version.
Something in Android 5.0 changed with the way I'm drawing that custom view that would show the normal editor.
So the operating system changed out from under you.
Yep.
And that is one of your inputs. Your entire platform is an input. How many of these I got left? I think this is the last one. The buttons that you put there are inputs, you guys. The buttons. You put them there. They're not exclusive to mobile. I just like this example. This is an app called Quick. This is an Instagram killer, you guys. These guys are based out of Louisville. They're really cool guys. You put a photo. You can put text on a photo. This is the Instagram killer. So let's start up. Pick a picture of me and my girlfriend Emily. Type some text on there. Hey, cowboy. Okay, so this is a free app. The way that they make money is microtransactions based on these premium fonts. So you got to pay to get these suckers. They're really good. So let's. We have the free ones, but I really like the premium ones. So I want to pull up this share menu. Oh, that went too quick. Let's do it again. I want to pull up the share menu. And notice that share and save are both grayed out because this is a premium font that I haven't paid for. But look at all these share options above that. So let's just try to share it anyway, even though the buttons just by clicking Hangouts. Yeah, you can totally share. You can get around their thing there. So this is me messaging myself on 2 different accounts. It's awkward. That's all I got. I love talking about software quality and testing. So let's go get beers and talk about that. Cool. Right.
So what everyone think, different format, fun.
Why are there marshmallows?
Oh, I'm happy you asked. So,
oh, I see.
So was this last night you sent me this video, Greg?
Yeah.
Okay. If I can.
Put that away. Oh, no.
Where?
Rita makes a big deal out of
In
everything.
honor of Android Marshmallow, we figured, are you familiar with Chubby Bunny?
No, you can refresh my memory.
Chubby Bunny is a game where it's a competition, and where all three of us are going to play it. You have to continually say Chubby Bunny
These are all
while
Android
sticking
engineers.
more and more marshmallows in your mouth.
This is not gonna go well.
You grab a marshmallow, stick it in your mouth, Chubby Bunny, Chubby Bunny.
Chubby bunny, chubby bunny, chubby bunny.
All right, second marshmallow. Chubby Bunny.
Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny, chubby bunny, chubby bunny. Shoot, spit it out.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny. Are you just on one side so far? Or have you mixed? You go both.
Chubby Bunny. Chubby Bunny. Chubby Bunny.
Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny. Chubby bunny.
This is the sixth one, right?
Chubby bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
How close to that? Oh, man, that was
It actually gets funnier every time you watch.
So can you bring those to the bar, Patrick?
Do what?
Can you bring those to the bar?
I think Greg wants to play Chubby Bunny, so. So for anyone who doesn't know, the new version of Android is called Marshmallow. So that was this week, last week,
It's just Tuesday or Monday.
Monday. Okay. Yeah, it's all a blur, so.
You stay up till 2 in the morning.
Maybe. Okay, so yeah, everyone liked presentations tonight. Good format, different. Okay, cool. You want to do anything interesting, fun, exciting? Just ready to go to the bar? Lots of head nods. Okay. Well, thanks for coming out. And if you want to play Chubby Bunny, Greg will play with you.